Hey everyone, welcome back to the Doctors In podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nadia Saba, president and founder of Dr. Greenhouse. This is our 100th podcast episode. We knew that this episode was coming up. And so as we were scheduling it out, I realized that this year's Indoor AgCon Takeaways episode would land on our 100th episode milestone. So to commemorate this milestone, we set up a spot on the floor of Indoor AgCon and scheduled interviews with some folks, some attendees, some vendors, some speakers, some experts in their field, as well as some of the organizers of this year's event. As we get into it, I think we have like 10 or 11 different guests this year who are going to share their takeaways as well as what they're excited about in CEA for the year to come. And, just for me, as I was interviewing people and talking to people in the show and after the show and before the show, I think that people are really excited to get back to the fundamentals. That was something that I have heard a lot over, the past few days is that, we are reorienting controlled environment agriculture towards farming. And people are really doubling down on that and refocusing CEA on what it is that we do and who we are. And ultimately, we are farmers. And I've heard that a lot more at this year's show. The other thing that I've heard more and more people mention is that CEA is a tool. It's not necessarily the toolbox, which I think we kind of fell into into that trap the last 10 or so years of thinking that CEA could be the end all be all, right? If we could just figure out how to make the automation work, how to scale it up to be profitable, how to, get the biggest bang for our buck in terms of AI and data management. And, there was a lot of money that was pumped into this industry thinking that, investors were making a tech play, right? That they were shaking up agriculture, that they were sort of reinventing the wheel. And that conversation, has been much more muted this year. And instead, people are talking about what is it that we need from CEA? What is it that CEA can provide that is unique and practical and real as part of, a subset of the greater agricultural community and industry? So that has been a very positive takeaway for me from this year's Indoor AgCon and the conversations that I've had. As I look to the year to come as it relates to controlled environment agriculture, I'm really optimistic. Another word that we've heard a lot at this year's show about sort of retooling back to greenhouses and to a technology that has been proven to work over several decades. Yes, there are, improvements that can be made and innovations that can be made, but ultimately greenhouses do work and they can work throughout the world. And that is ultimately why I fell in love with CEA, was realizing that greenhouses could be used to feed the world, and to grow food anywhere under any conditions. And I really think that that's what the vision for this year is going to be, is how do we give growers the tools and the money and the resources that they need to be successful, both profitably and productively, as well as just finding their place within an industry and a community that accepts them and that wants to use their talents and their abilities to really make this industry what it is we want it to be, right? We have the opportunity, I feel like, even within this course correction of the past few years, to kind of, reconsider what it is we're doing and why we're doing it and who we want to be involved in this. And I'm really excited to support my colleagues and my clients to navigate the next year, to become more resourceful, to save money, be more efficient, and ultimately just to produce a really good product, whether they're growing lettuce or cannabis or even bean sprouts. I loved the bean sprout track that we had at this year's conference, and I hope that next year there will be another track that is devoted to another crop that maybe people aren't thinking about. And, as I was listening to some of the bean sprout panels, I realized that actually when I was in elementary school, I took a field trip with I think maybe 4th or 5th grade with my fellow students to a bean sprout farm here in Sacramento or somewhere in this region. I have sort of some dark memories, dark as in I remember it being dark inside the sprout farm. And fast forward 30 or maybe almost 40 years now, and we're talking about bean sprouts again. And I love that. I love that they are back into the conversation with controlled environment agriculture, because clearly they have needed to grow, within 4 walls and a roof to be successful. So welcome to the fold. We're excited to have you. We're excited to be part of your community. And so, I hope again next year, maybe there's a track devoted to propagation or nurseries that grow tree crops or vine crops or things that then go outside, or maybe we talk about tropical plants that are becoming more and more difficult to grow in their natural environments, like cocoa and coffee and bananas and other sorts of crops. So I'm really looking forward to another specific crop track next year, potentially. Anyway, Suzanne, Brian, Kyle, and the board of advisors to Indoor AgCon, great job putting on a great show. Congratulations on, I think, over 1,500 attendees, more than 300 booths. Boy, has this conference grown since the first one I went to 11 years ago. I'm so excited to see how it continues to grow, both in people and in plants and crops that it serves. All right, let's hear from everybody else that we interviewed on the show floor. Thank you to everyone who is willing to participate in the conversation, and I really look forward to continuing with it this year and to see you again next year. Cheers. Hello. So, Brian, please tell us who you are and what your association is with Indoor AgCon.
Good morning, Dr. Nadia. I'm Brian Sullivan, CEO of Indoor AgCon, and it's a pleasure to be on your 100th show.
Thank you so much for being on our 100th episode. And thank you for all the support to the industry and to us over the years. We really appreciate it. So, what has been one of your biggest takeaways from this year's Indoor AgCon?
One of the things that has surprised me, and it does almost annually, is the amount of international folks that are trekking to Las Vegas for Indoor AgCon. Yeah. The event is producing a real lot of content that folks are looking for, and it always surprises me how many folks are coming in from Europe, from Asia, from African nations are coming. We have tribal nations here that have come in, so it's a very wide and diverse group that are all interested in indoor agriculture and closed environment.
Nice. Yeah, we listened to the Canada panel this morning, and wow, they were a breadth of information. Like they just went deep, and they were really interesting, really experienced. It was fun to get their perspective in this market.
Yes, the Canadian group was exceptional this morning. It's extremely timely. There's a lot going on. The word tariff is being thrown around left and right here, but it was so timely, the information, and these are the experts that came from Canada to present their positions. So again, timely and international. Yeah. So what are you excited about in the industry for the coming year? I'm excited about the optimism. You know, folks, you know, we have heard some folks, oh, the industry is turned down and things, but here, this event is the largest one we've done. There's over 300 booths here on it. The attendance is skyrocketing from around the world on it. So I see optimistic future ahead. So that's the most exciting thing for us on it. We'll be here next year in Las Vegas. So again, optimism is really the engine that's growing CEA.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad that you touched on the size of the conference this year, because I think we've all been really curious. We've seen how Indoor AgCon has grown over the years. I've been attending since 2015. The only years I've missed were the gap years of COVID, and it's exciting to see how this grew from like 8 or 10 booths to 300 now. And attendance. So can you just share any numbers in terms of how attendance was this year?
Attendance is up. And again, it's because of, you know, the international scope and the content. You know, Doctor, you've been with us for many times and a speaker. We are dedicated to very good content. It's all about the message. It's all about being current and understanding the trends and where we are. So that drives folks to the event. So everybody wants to know what's happening. You can find out here.
Yeah. And, you know, I was talking to one of my friends, colleagues, clients last night who's in the cannabis industry, and she said she was really surprised by how many cannabis growers were here. She was pleasantly surprised. So I think you've created a really big tent here that's just allowing everyone to learn and to network. So thank you for that.
Thank you. It is the environment. So we're almost crop agnostic.
Yeah.
So, you know, folks that were in cannabis, I think they found themselves in a silo on it. And when we started speaking with them, they found out that they could break out. You know, what about fruits and what about leafy greens and other products that they might be interested in producing. So the cannabis folks have embraced us and we've embraced them.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy. It's the beginning of day 2 this morning. So thank you again for all that you're doing for our industry and our community.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Greenhouse, because it's always an honor, and I'm really feeling honored to be part of your 100th episode.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you.
Kelley, please introduce yourself.
Hey, my name's Kelley Nicholson, and I'm with MicrogGow and Autogrow Control Systems, and I'm on my 25th year in the industry.
That's amazing. How many times have you been to Indoor AgCon?
I've been to every single one. Except for 22. In 2022, I didn't make that one, but I was
amazing.
at the very first one. I've been to every MJ BizCon. I've been to just about every show over the years. You know, I did all the HMAs and all the PGTAs and all the maximum yields, and you know, I've done all the shows all over the country.
Okay, so you've been to more Indoor AgCons than I have,
Yes.
is basically the bottom line.
Yeah, probably. Probably more than most anybody here, to be honest.
Right, including the organizers.
Yeah.
So what has been one of your big takeaways from this year's Indoor AgCon?
So last year when I came to Indoor Ag, I was so impressed with how big it had gotten, and I immediately went back home and told everybody, I was like, this is a new MJ BizCon. This is where all the cultivators are going to come. And I showed up this year, and it's doubled in size, and I was spot on. This is where the cultivators are, and that's amazing because MJ Biz just cultivators aren't there anymore. And so for people who like me who sell greenhouse controllers, I need to talk to the growers. I don't need to talk to investors. I don't need to talk to retail outlets. I need to talk to the grower.
You don't need to talk to people who package, who sell packaging materials?
No, I don't need that. I need to talk to the guy who's in there or the girl who's in there doing the work, who will have her time saved by putting a control system in.
Yeah.
That's what I need to do. I need to get in front of that person. So if a show doesn't have cultivators, it's not really a show that I benefit from. So this is great. This turned out so good. One of the things that was really cool is as of yesterday, like the whole map for next year was pretty much empty, and it's almost all the way filled up. That's how successful this was, because that means everybody went to dinner last night and talked about what a good day it was, and all ran in this morning and booked their booths. So I mean,
wow,
how can you? I mean, that's for me. That's proof in the pudding. You know what I mean? It's like there you go. It was such a good first day that everybody booked for next year.
They're ready to come back.
Yeah, ready to come back.
Wow, cool. So what are you excited for in the CEA industry this coming year?
I'm working on a lot of really cool projects, some indoor, some greenhouse, and some that have not a whole lot to do with anything traditional in the market, and it's kind of fun to be working on new projects like that. I like things that are a little bit off the wall. When a customer calls and says, I have a crazy idea, and I'm like, yes, tell me your crazy idea. Like, let me see if I can make this work. So I always love that. The one thing I'm really looking forward to working with more growers who are using under canopy lighting. Oh, yeah. I kind of started to hear the buzz over the last 6 or 7 months, I guess, and I didn't really know much about it. But then there was a whole talk yesterday about it, which really piqued my interest. And now I've been talking to a lot of people about it, and lots of growers are getting really good results using it. Tons of rebates are available. And so as a controls person, my first thought is, okay, so now what is that going to change in how I control grow rooms? Like, I want to put a temperature sensor down there and make sure that we're not building up too much heat around the root zones.
Please.
And if I put a media monitor in, if the root zones are getting too warm because of the lights, I need to change up the irrigation now to be able to irrigate a little bit more often to pull some cool water through.
And you know where that leads for me is then I'm really curious what the transpiration rates are going to be, because that's going to change the latent loads and how much dehumidification we have to do.
We were talking about that. It's like, now we have to do more dehumidification. Do we need to run things cooler in the room, or are we still keeping... So I always love to look at things from the control side of it, because I'm like, ooh, a new way of growing. Every time you change one thing in a grow room, everything changes. And so I've been talking to quite a few people, and installers, light sellers, and everybody's like, yeah, the growers are loving it. And there's so many rebates available that a lot of people are getting them for basically free. And so it's awesome. And we learned a little bit about the inner canopy lighting for vine crops and whatnot. And I have a few growers that kind of experiment with that a bit, but I don't really have a ton. So I'm looking to find out a little bit more about that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all your service in this industry, all your knowledge. It's always fun to talk to you, and I can't wait to see you next year.
Yeah, well, right back at you. It's always a fun time hanging out with you guys, and I love this industry. I mean, I've just been running into so many people I've known for so long, and, we're all getting older, but we're all just getting better, like fine wine.
That's right.
Yes. So thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. Hi, Jim.
Hi.
Thanks for being on our 100th podcast episode today. So would you tell everyone who you are, who you work for?
My name is Jim Rearden, and I'm the president of Biotherm Solutions.
So how many times have you been to Indoor AgCon?
I believe this is my 5th.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is one of your big takeaways from this year's conference?
I'd say that there's been... as any new industry, I could have kind of a reformation of the energy here, but I think it's become less dramatic this year. There's the influx of huge money and big mistakes seems to be going away, but the basic fundamentals of what we're trying to achieve seems to be driving it in the right direction, a very pragmatic direction. So I'm optimistic and excited about it, even though we're witnessing a lot of big changes and some not so happy news about some big operators that were maybe overinvested. But I think the industry, is realizing that this is farming, not tech. And that's the bottom line.
That's what it comes down to, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
And it's, witness what's going on with a lot of companies that got confused about that, is it's a tech play. And, if you realize that this is really farming, and if I roll up to a place and I see an office building full of people in white coats, I kind of go back to the car because I'm worried they won't be there in 2 months.
Right. And you and I have driven up to a facility where there were like half a dozen Teslas in the parking lot. That's usually a red flag. That was 6 red flags, honestly. So what are you excited about for CEA in the year to come?
Yeah, the basic promise and fundamentals of reducing carbon footprint, having close to market, wholesome, produce is we can't get away from that. That's the reality as the world climate changes, et cetera. So I think that the how we get it done is becoming very obvious. That I have a bias toward using natural light, and so the people that are using the big light bulb in the sky, I think, will be successful if they stay in their lane and don't get over the tips of their skis. And also, I think that there's become a lot more sophistication in the supply chain in North America. And so I don't think that people have to go overseas to buy projects anymore, because that a lot of times results in challenges with support and consumable parts taking too long. Overnight's 2 weeks. And so I'm excited, because I think that as the North American contingent of manufacturers are understanding the space and how to pragmatically help these people become sustainable, I think that's a really good thing for the market.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we've seen a big shift away from indoor towards greenhouse in the last couple of years, which finally our name, Dr. Greenhouse, is coming to fruition.
Yeah.
People are realizing the value in the greenhouse part of that.
Did you try to change it to Dr. Indoor Grow before?
No, but honestly, people tried to convince us to change our business name to be more general or be focused on indoor. And I was like, no, it's Dr. Greenhouse. And here, we're at the future. And here we are.
We've seen the same thing in the cannabis business, where the cost of production is 20-25% more when they don't use natural light. And I believe the product isn't as good either. So I think it's happening here as well. We have a lot of land in the U.S. and we can still be close to market. We don't have to do it in a warehouse. And I think that's really where it's going to go.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, Jim, thank you so much. It's always good to see you here and everywhere, and to get a chance to talk to you. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, and congratulations on the 100th podcast. That's amazing.
Thank you so much.
Great resource.
Hi, Michelle. Hello. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
All right, so please tell our audience who you are and who you work for.
I am the Chief Horticulture Officer at Living Greens Farm in Faribault, Minnesota. And I have been working for them for the last 12 years, and I've been in the CEA industry since 2003.
One of the reasons I love talking to you. You're an OG like me. Well, at least in the new old generation? I don't know, whatever. It doesn't matter. So how many indoor ag cons have you been to?
I've only missed 2, and I've been attending these conferences before they were called Indoor AgCon.
Yeah.
And so I predate everybody pretty much here.
So what is one of your big takeaways from this year's conference?
Well, I attended your little speech the other day on cannabis, and as a person who is always trying to learn and develop different skills and tactics, I learned some things from your talk that I will put into practice during my personal grows.
Do I get to know what that is?
I didn't know what a P1 and a P2 were before your talk.
Michelle is new to cannabis. She's a lettuce grower primarily. Yeah.
Yes.
What are you excited about for the CEA industry in the coming year?
Personally, our company is looking to expand finally. We've been an R&D facility for 12 years. We've watched the industry grow. We've watched it contract. My shareholders are awesome in the fact they're like, let's wait to see what we need to fix instead of being one of the people who had to contract. And it looks like that we're going to finally go forward on a commercial build.
That's awesome. Is there anything that you've seen as a trend over the last 10 or even 22 years in this industry, as we've gone from, say, greenhouse primarily, and then a big push on vertical farming and indoor, and now at least we're seeing a shift back to greenhouses? What kind of trends have you been noticing, especially with lettuce, which is your primary crop?
Besides the growers getting younger and younger, the trends I'm seeing is going back to basics. There was such a push, greenhouse and indoor growing, of we have to have the best gadget, we have to have the best technology, we're a technology company that just happens to grow lettuce, versus all the talks so far to this session have been focused on we're farmers first, we're growing a product, we're not selling a technology, and that has been very refreshing. And every talk has stated how important the grower is for the company, when just a few years ago there was several keynotes saying we won't need a grower this time 2 years from now. And so it's refreshing to realize that we are farmers. We have to go back to our roots. We are selling lettuce or produce of some type, and keep that mentality, and that technology is the tool to aid us, not to be all and end all.
I remember a few years ago having that conversation with you and a few other attendees about that very subject. And I know that you are a really big advocate and really pushing for Indoor AgCon to be more grower focused, have more practical information for people like you. And it seems like that's happening. They're listening. I'm sure you weren't the only one asking for that. And it's been very cultivator focus this year.
I went one step further. About 5 to 6 years ago, I joined the board at Indoor AgCon.
Nice.
So I could help bring more growers and more grower focus. So as soon as this conference ends, I give Suzanne about a month and I start bugging her about all the different topics people have given me here and what they want to see in future sessions. I am always polling people, what do you want to see next? How would this help you? How does that not help you? How far down the rabbit hole can we go in some of these talks? Do we need to stay higher level? And they've taken most of my suggestions to heart.
Do you have any of that feedback now?
I do. There is a push of maybe dividing a track out, and I have not talked to Suzanne yet, of newer growers and experienced growers.
Good idea.
And so then the newer growers would have a little bit higher level. It might be still the grower track.
Yeah.
But then you have a deeper dive, and there is no surface. The talk is just deep dive on whatever subject it is. A very near one to my heart is nutrient uptake for the plants. Yours is HVAC. Something like that, you wouldn't start with any of the top stuff. You would just go deep into whatever is the hardest thing for an advanced grower to manipulate. So once they have their pyramid of growing going, you're just working on that top 5% yield increase. You're not working on the first 50%.
Yeah. And we work with growers of both ilks, right? Like the people who just fundamentally don't have necessarily good fundamental understanding of climate management. Like maybe they understand temperature and humidity, but now they want to understand VPD better. And then we have some clients who are very advanced, and they literally will tell us, we just want you to help us fine-tune that last 5%.
And 5% is 5%. That is, so a 5% yield increase could be like a 15% increase in profitability. It's because you're not putting anything extra as inputs at that point, per se. You're just tweaking your systems with not a lot of extra inputs, whether it's light, HVAC, fertilizers, airflow, whatever it is. That 5% is kind of like, chasing the ring, right?
Yeah. It's a fine wine.
It's a very fine wine, yes. Yeah. It's not a beer anymore. You're at fine wines.
Or jug wine. Box wine? We don't say jug wine, do we? We say box wine.
Or the 2-liter plastic bottle of wine that used to be back in the day.
Way back in the day. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for having this conversation with me, and I love seeing you every year.
Yes, same here, and have a good day.
Thanks. Hey, Carly, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Good. So please introduce yourself. Who are you? Where do you work?
I am Carly Becker. I work at the Ohio Controlled Environment Agriculture Center. We call it OHCEAC, and that is at Ohio State University.
So have you been to Indoor AgCon before?
No, this is my first year.
What do you think?
It is much larger in scale, no pun intended. It's great to see so many different companies and educators here.
So what has been one of your big takeaways from the conference?
I was happy and gladly not surprised that there was more inclusive thoughts, more wanting to collaborate within industry, which I think is not too often talked about in some of the other events I've been to, so that was a pleasant surprise.
Nice. What are you excited about for the CEA industry in the coming year?
That's a good question. I really am excited for more education to come out, more accessible learning for all, because I've seen some people talking about paywalls or just access to education for workers, more skilled workers. That's a big topic right now, and making sure that people have the resources to become that skilled labor so they can create careers for themselves.
So you were talking earlier about one of the education tracks that you attended. Can you just talk a little bit about what you heard, what they were talking about?
So the panel was on K through 12 educators getting access to mostly hydroponics, but we're talking about different systems and how best to help teachers and get kids involved, because learning about how much food really costs, where it comes from, it gets them more excited, gets them to understand where the food comes from and eat the vegetables, providing better healthcare, there were so many different tangents that came off of this conversation. It was fascinating.
Awesome. Well, do you think you're going to come back?
I think so. There were so many great connections here. I got to see some of my favorite people, so it's been a great event.
Awesome. Well, Carly, thank you for spending a few minutes with us, and it was so exciting to see you here. I was so excited when we walked up to that table yesterday during the keynote, and you were right there.
My hair helps. My red hair helps.
Yeah. Just like my blonde beacon hair helped in Japan when we were there last year.
We need our landmark people.
Well, thank you so much, Carly. Have a great rest of the show.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Hey, Glenn, it's so good to see you at Indoor AgCon. Introduce yourself. Who are you? Who do you work for?
Well, my name is Glenn Behrman, and I don't think I work for anybody. Okay,
Perfect answer.
I think I work with some people in this industry, and right now, Growtainers and CEA Advisors is a part of Hydrofarm. You know, I work with them, and I try to do what I do, you know, which goes way beyond just building Growtainers.
So I'm so excited to have you on this 100th podcast episode here at Indoor AgCon, because we met at Indoor AgCon.
Number one.
Yeah,
Number one.
Jean Giacomelli introduced us. I remember having breakfast with you and Jean and Debbie before we all walked down to, I don't even know what that venue was. It was a really cute, quaint venue.
We were sitting, the four of us.
Yeah,
I remember that.
When there were like maybe 10 booths. And this year I heard there are 300 booths.
The first thing I want to say is that I have to tell you how impressed I was by you and by Jean and by the people that I met there who knew so much about this industry. Although at the time I had 30 years of experience in the foliage industry, I didn't know the first thing about indoor farming or nothing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I came from, you know, I built a very, very big foliage business. Okay, I mean, in fact, I'm like I was one of the people back in the 70s that invented the indoor plant business. But then I found indoor farming, and I remembered, like I say, being around people who were educated and you know, knowledgeable and experienced, and I was in awe. Okay, I didn't know anything about anything.
So, on that note, what is one of your big takeaways or main takeaways from this year's Indoor AgCon?
You know, I think that the majority of the booths that I see here and the people that I see here are all here for the right reasons. Okay? You know, I think that it's people that are serious about this industry. I think that the number of people in the industry that have been influenced by Silicon Valley and easy money and high valuations and all the crap that we went through, okay, they're gone. They're not here. You know, people are here for the right reasons. People here are much more open and much more welcoming. You know, much less don't touch me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They appreciate the opportunity.
So, on that positive note, what are you excited about for CEA over the next year?
What I'm optimistic about is that the new breed of people entering this industry are coming in for the right reasons. You know, they're not here to raise money. They're not here to, you know, to be another Plenty or another Keller or another,
App Harvest.
App Harvest, right. A lot of the people that are entering this industry are a work in progress. And what they don't have now, they will have in a year from now.
Yeah.
That's the right way.
There's a little more realism, more pragmatism.
Yeah.
A lot
And
of
a
people
lot
here
more
to learn.
sincerity.
Yeah. and authenticity.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
a lot more sincerity.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, a lot. You know, it's like the guys in the growers in the cannabis industry. They're not growers; they're cultivators. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's all nonsense. You know what I mean?
They're gardeners.
Yeah, I mean,
And bros
they're growing
sometimes.
a weed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're growing a weed that was doing fine without them. Okay, for many years. You know what I mean? So, you know, it's like we're getting down to earth. You know, we're back to earth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I just think that, look, you know, at the end of the day, it's about food production. It's about horticulture. It's about, you know, the core elements of this industry haven't changed. The people that are in it have.
Yeah. I love that perspective. And I love that we've been on this journey together, at least within the window of time that Indoor AgCon has been around.
The Indoor Ag has been a tremendous barometer of this industry.
Oh, yeah. Well
Okay,
put.
which
Yeah.
it really has. You know, and all of us who have been here, you know, numerous times, you know what I mean? If you stop and think about, you know, who attended this year, what was the focus that year, you know what I mean? What did you see that particular year? You know, it was like up and down like a yo-yo.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And it's finally, in my opinion, found its footing. You know what I mean? And it's interesting because I was talking to somebody earlier today, and I was saying, you know, people come to Indoor Ag to socialize because they don't have time to socialize and cultivate.
I like that.
You know?
It's a good place to connect. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
find
yeah.
for me, I meet new people, I get to reconnect with old friends, and I get to learn something.
Yeah.
You know, it's the whole package for me.
Nadia, I'm doing it 50 years. I learn every day. I can't believe it sometimes. You know? I'm lucky because I get to do projects that are really the ones that nobody else can do.
Yep.
You know what I mean? We just did a big project, a multi-unit complex for Driscoll's strawberries.
Yep.
We did a project for beneficial insectary to grow insects in containers. We're working with the biggest potato producer in the world.
Cool.
You know what I mean? We're building tissue culture containers. Listen, I've grown right alongside of this industry.
Yep.
So,
Yep. We've all grown together.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Those of
it's
us
been
that
a
are
real
still
gift.
that have stuck around,
Yep.
that are in it for the long haul,
Yeah.
and have believed in it from
Yeah.
the beginning, regardless of all the hype
Yeah.
and all the investment money, etc.
And all the fear, you know what I mean?
And you're
Because
right,
let's face
yeah.
it, people are falling all around us.
You're right.
You know what I mean? And what I've learned is most people just look at the headlines,
Right.
okay? And I have a gift, okay, of taking 20 minutes to read after the headline,
Yeah. Right.
okay? And I find out what the truth really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Well, I also have found, like, just on that sort of note of fear, is that I've done interviews with some big newspapers, and they didn't publish what I said because I was speaking
doesn't sound
of
right.
truth,
Right.
And of positivity and optimism, and that did not fit the narrative that they wanted to sell.
I remember, I know that. It's happened with me too.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember having a conversation with somebody who's pretty well known in the industry and telling them, don't be such a cheerleader, tell the truth.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is business, okay? You know, you've been to Holland, right?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sure that you've had the same feeling that I've had when you're driving around the Westlands.
Yeah.
Okay, and you know, for that one moment when you look around and all you see is greenhouses, you know why you do what you do.
Yeah.
And it's something that only people who've been there and did that have any idea what I'm talking about. But the truth of the matter is business is business. You know, and you have to pay your bills, and you have to feel good about what you do, and you have to be honest, and you have to have integrity. You know what I mean? And you can't work for money. You know what I mean? You can't. Okay, because eventually it'll bite you in the ass.
Yeah.
You know, and if you have a few really serious things that guide you, you'll be fine. You're in the greatest business in the world.
Love it. Well, Glenn, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure catching up with you today, and every year I enjoy seeing you.
And I'm grateful for you for inviting me. So,
Thank you. Thank you for being on our 100th episode.
Yeah, really. That's a pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, Henry, it's so great to see you at Indoor AgCon.
It's great to see you here as well, Nadia. How's
When
it
was
going?
the last time you were here?
I mean, I was thinking about it. I think I've missed 3 years, which is wild.
That is crazy.
Because I've been usually in the Middle East doing a lot of work there. There's
Yeah.
conferences this time of year, and our business has grown there. So it's so good to be back, see so many familiar faces, see the companies, and see the energy here in North America.
Okay, so I didn't introduce you at all.
Oh,
Usually
hi.
I say, who are you?
I'm Henry. You should know me. I'm just kidding. No, I'm Henry Gordon-Smith, founder and CEO of Agritecture. I started as a blogger all about CEA, and that became a consulting firm. And we do tech-agnostic consulting around the world for greenhouses, vertical farms.
Awesome. So when was your first Indoor AgCon?
My first one, or was the first one.
I thought
I think
so,
it was
yeah.
the first one,
You
yeah.
guys used to have like a competition,
We
right?
did a workshop here.
Yeah.
We did one in Vegas. Actually, a lot of you I met here got into the industry from that workshop, like Jim Pantaleo, for example. His first
Really?
in was in that workshop.
I didn't know that.
And the workshops, for context, were super fun because we would do like these design charrettes with 3 teams. We'd pick a site. Actually, they had 3 sites in the context of the Vegas one, and then they would compete and pitch their ideas. But they would go through a step-by-step process for doing your market research a little bit, designing your farm, choosing your crops, choosing your technology, and then as a team, they would sort of pitch it. So it was a really fun way to create a structured, how do you plan one of these farms? In the case of Vegas, we used abandoned motels that a partner had provided. So it was really, they were really creative. They were like a little agritourism sort of vibe to it. And it was really, 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 really fun.
I have to ask, how did you even get involved in the first Indoor AgCon? Did you know Nicola?
Well, Nicola was very active, she's as active in general, on LinkedIn and reaching out to people. And I think she heard of me and she reached out, and I said, I had done the workshops in London and in New York before. So I sort of pitched her the workshop. She said, yeah, let's go for it. And then I got on a call with Phillips and they sponsored the first one and we came and did it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So how have you seen this conference, I'm going to stick to the conference, not the industry,
Sure.
evolve since that very first one?
Well, I mean, I think I used to call it Indoor BragCon, because it was people just come here and they just talk about how everything's amazing and why they're the best and all that. And I think we've all been through some, trauma with all the disastrous collapse of vertical farming and some other overhyped up, overvaluated companies. So now we can sort of have a bit more of a reality check. So for me, that's the key difference, is I'm seeing more honesty, more data sharing, less we're the best, we're the greatest, but people talking about real results a bit more. There's still exaggeration, there's still all that, still marketing.
If I hear one more person say, it could save 90% water, I will barf.
Yes. But so I think that's a big shift for it. I don't know, there's a nice small, medium scale entourage, of farmers here. And I like their representation. I like the companies that are targeting them with supplies. It's not just the big ones.
Yeah.
So I always like that diversity because I'm a big fan of the small, medium ones too.
Yeah.
I think they have a better chance of profitability. They may not raise huge amounts of money, but they can really feed their local communities, be really thrifty companies. So, I mean, just a shout out to Rooted Robotics. That's one of the companies that is really interesting to me and I think represents these sort of veterans who have been through these big farms and seen the problems with it. And Eric Roth, who also used to work with me, wanted to create a company where the robotics costs are so much lower and accessible to small microgreens producers. That's cool,
Yeah.
That's cool, sorry.
First F-bomb!
Sorry.
It came from
I mean,
Henry!
it was like a half F-bomb. It was a half.
It wasn't me.
But I think that's really cool because I like, that's what it's about, right? As the industry goes through its ups and downs, it's the veterans that survive that bring the real honesty and knowledge to the solutions. I think that's our hope. You know what I mean?
Agreed. So on that note, what is one of your biggest takeaways from this year's conference?
Well, I actually just published my weekly newsletter today, and I said my main takeaway is this, because I heard it consistently. I heard at the beginning from the Sobeys guy, right, this big produce buyer, and he was saying that the CA category really is growing. The consumers want more of it, especially in leafy greens, and it's tripled, although it's from a small baseline, it's tripled was his quote. And so I think that's really going to lend itself. Obviously, tomatoes were like already there, but it's going to be interesting to see if we can do the same thing with strawberries in the next decade. That's going to take a while. But leafy greens, still, there's a lot of room to fill that in. We then heard from Abby from Bright Farms, a producer, and she was also talking about the growth of that category. It's going to be $500 million this year, of CEA grown in the United States. That's awesome. I mean, that is growth. That's 20% of the Northeast market that's grown in CEA.
Wow.
Now that is an impact, right? So you can see a future where we get to 80% like tomatoes that are CEA grown in the East Coast, and that's really cool. I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? All this talk about the food comes from California and Arizona and it's grown in all these bad ways and blah 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 blah, and those 20% is a dent. So we're going to see that grow. And now it's less about convincing the consumer and the retailer, which is, I think, a much harder ask and a lot more work than just getting the optimization of the operations, getting them bigger, getting the climate control settled, minimizing these issues and scaling up. So I think that's going to drive new kinds of investors. They're not VC hyped up investors. Investors say, you know what, I see a market here. I see a future to penetrate this market. I see a way to do this more efficiently. And I think that's a really positive thing that we need to focus on. So that's my main takeaway from this event, is that CEA lettuce, leafy greens, has a bright future and a pathway to actually potentially full market penetration in North America.
Wow. One of the panelists on the keynote panel this morning from Canada, he made a comment about how, they had to educate retailers and consumers, but now what they're seeing is that the retailers are educating themselves, which is ideal, right?
I mean, even Sobeys, the guy's title says like CEA procurement specialist,
Are you serious?
Yeah, like the retailers that have CEA operations, and titles like businesses within it. I mean, one of my clients, IKEA, had a whole section for this where they were looking at it. So, the companies, it takes time, it's like remarketing. You have to remind you of this message over and over and over again. Yeah. And I think in our industry, we're like, okay, we're hearing the same things again and again and again. But repeating that starts to get it out into the mass market, to these corporations, these other people, these other businesses, other sectors. And for them, they maybe have only heard it 2 or 3 times, and that's enough for them to start absorbing it. We've heard it 1,000,000 times.
Right.
So it feels like it's overdone for us, but for them, it's actually enough that it starts to become part of the titles, part of the businesses. I've heard about retailers doing feasibility studies for their own farms, vertical integration. I think we're going to see a bit more of that. So I've been really pretty down on the industry for a while, and now I think I'm on an optimistic footing, I have to say, especially
exciting.
In this country. Yeah.
Okay, well, so you talked a lot about long-term and the optimism there. What are you excited about for CEA in the coming year, just the next 12 months? Till we meet again here, maybe. Hopefully.
I'll come to Indoor AgCon again because I'm going to be teaching at Columbia University, lecturing there. Nice. So I'll be in the U.S. a lot more, which I'm excited about. This year, what can I say? The thing that's coming to mind is these tariffs, right? We've got this very volatile leader right now, and it's the biggest contrast to the point I made about optimism, right? It's the biggest wrench in it. So the question is, are people going to just hold on and wait? But how long can you wait? 2 years maybe until we see some different changes, but he's there. Or are we going to actually take the risks based on that optimism? Or is there a way to leverage this chaos for some wins? So I guess that's what I'm excited about, or it's in my mind, I guess is the way to think about it. But look, there's other events happening across the states, and there's smaller events and things like that. One other thing I'm really excited about, I'll just say, this year is the Homegrown Innovation Challenge, which is a Canadian-based competition for berry production across Canada. So the goal is to grow berries year-round. And I'm one of the judges. And I just finished visiting 5 different projects in Canada that are producing blackberries, blueberries, strawberries, raspberries. That's the other one. And they're doing it in the winter, and there's snow everywhere, and it's just crazy. Wow. And it's these amazing academic private partnerships. And I am so excited for when they start to get more commercialized, because there's some really cool innovations across genetics, across climate management, across different greenhouse materials, and there's all kinds of cool lighting companies partnering with them, and Argus and Sullivan is involved, Canadian companies.
Yeah.
So I really, really got excited about Canada again, as part of this continent and what it's doing, and it's a $33 million competition. It's legitimate.
Holy cow! Wow.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, nobody's talked about it, which maybe is a little surprising, but you knew Dixon. Would you mind just sharing some comments, kind of thoughts and takeaways and how he influenced our industry and where we are today? And
I mean, look, I think it's a beautiful thing you brought up, and I think we should hold a moment for Dixon because so many of us are here or we extended our passion because of what he did. Dixon was the OG vertical farming influencer, and he did it with his book and he did it with his personal interactions. Like he would just go for lunches with people all the time.
He was such a friendly,
down to earth guy. Like always up to talk about this and sit down with you. For me, I don't know if you know my personal story with him, but I went to Columbia University and I wanted to get into agriculture, and there were no agriculture courses. So I contacted Dixon. I said, can I create a course called Challenges in Vertical Farming? You'll be my advisor. Columbia allowed that. So for an entire semester, he was my advisor. I would spend every week one-on-one with him in his office, and we were designing a vertical farm together. What I remember really fondly was that, he was always inspiring, always pushing me, but he would always say, like, make it taller. Because he was all about the skyscraper vertical farms. And I was like, I want to make it practical. Like I was all about get the data. Like I remember trying to fit it to the right zoning ratios that were permitted with the site, Like I wanted everything to be as realistic as possible. Because that was like...
He's like, dream bigger.
He's like, make it taller. I'm like, literally, legally, it wouldn't be allowed to be that tall. And this was our relationship, was this right brain, left brain kind of thing, to put it simply. And it was so collaborative and so fun. He also pushed me, he introduced me to Max Losel, and we co-founded the Association for Vertical Farming, which is also an early impact in this industry. Mm-hmm. I've met so many people, especially in the early years, it's like, I read Dixon's book and I started a vertical farm. Here it is. And I would tour them. I mean, Green Skies Vertical Farm was one of them. The Mylands Vertical Farm. I mean, there were so many. Local Garden that were just started off this book. And the power of ideas, that's what Dixon really represents to me, is that never underestimate the power of sharing your vision, your passion. I mean, I do think we can all be a little bit more, the line between that and hype is, cautious. And I've always been, public and private as well, telling Dixon, look, we need to talk about where the industry is going to go in reality. But he was a visionary, and that was his role. And he played that role better than anyone. And rest in power, Dixon. We're all here thinking about you.
Thank you, Henry, for your thoughts on Dixon. And he influenced this whole industry. I mean, not this whole industry, but possibly why Indoor AgCon exists.
Yeah.
Right? And I have definitely come across other mechanical engineering professionals his book inspired them. Oh, cool. And maybe they even had degrees in agricultural engineering and then went into another engineering, and then they saw his book and read his book and were like, oh my God, right? I can apply engineering to the skyscraper greenhouse or to this vertical farm. And so he even inspired people who are outside of the industry but could support the industry.
Well, there's this book. It's so true what you're saying. There's this book, but then there's the New Yorker article. And if you look at the data on like Google Trends and Google searches, after the New Yorker article came out, it really created access to him and his ideas at a wider scale. And the internet blew up off that article. And so many other blogs, so much content, so many other... So that's how it went beyond our industry when it became such a mass market content thing. And again, that's really the power. And I wish we could get traditional media to talk about our industry in better ways than they have, because we could leverage that kind of thing to really show, for example, that 20% of packaged leafy greens in the Northeast are CEA grown. I mean, that's amazing,
It seems like they only want to publish negative headlines.
Yeah.
How much energy, we're using all this energy, and here's this failure over here and this failure over there. And when I've been interviewed and my message didn't fit their narrative, they don't publish it.
They cut that part.
Yeah. And I'm like, it's not as bad as you're talking about.
Do better, journalists.
Yeah, right?
Do better. That's what we're saying here.
Henry, thank you so much for participating
in
our 100th episode. It's so good to see you
100.
here.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Okay, good to see you too. Let's enjoy the show.
Sounds good. Hey, Austin, it's so good to see you at Indoor AgCon.
Good to see you, Nadia.
So, Austin, tell our audience who you are, where you work, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, so my name is Austin Smith. I work at Grodan. I handle commercial sales for the vegetable sector at the company. So very focused in the U.S., buying crops, lettuce, everything that falls under that.
And Austin, we know each other from the OHCEAC days.
That's right.
Right, from the University of Arizona.
Yes, and I'm always waving your flag. I always talk about the rock stars that have come out of the program, and
there's a few
and
of
you
us.
are one of them.
Yeah.
I hit the holy grail when I was working down there and clearing out a cabinet, and I found the some initial documents from the CEA Student Association, and it had your name and Jen Nelkin at that point.
Yes,
so, but yeah,
yes.
you and Jen.
I can't call her
So,
Jen Freimark. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah. But no, there's a lot of good people that come out of the program, and I'm just happy to be part of the group. I don't consider myself a rock star, but I'm surrounded by a lot of good people.
Well, we love seeing you. We love having you in our industry, and I'm glad you're here. Have you been to Indoor AgCon before?
I have. So I haven't been coming consistently, but I've been 4 or 5 times over the last 8 years or 9 years.
Okay.
So I saw it first came out when I was working down in Tucson at the OHCEAC, and just looking at the bright lights. But I've seen the show. The show has changed, and I'm really excited with the way things have going. We've been looking for a home for these vegetable people in the U.S., and it's nice to see everyone rallying around this event, get us all together in one spot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So what has been one of your biggest takeaways from this year's Indoor AgCon?
So what my biggest takeaway is just that we are getting the right people here at a conference. So it's strictly from the networking side. For me, this is absolutely the place that I need to be. I did not indulge in the educational programs, but I know Kyle, who puts those together and coordinates those. I've been hearing wonderful things about the content that's being shared in there.
So, I mean, you've been primarily on the expo floor. What have you seen on the expo floor? Have you had good traffic? Have you had good conversations?
Yeah, so we haven't had a booth. Grodan didn't have a booth this year.
Okay.
I want to look at changing that next year because everyone's here. I think the most important thing is just seeing a diversity of things. I've been to conferences before where it's all cannabis or it's all vertical farming or it's hard to find the vegetable one. But out here, at least, all of my people, we're all represented here. So it's good to see that everyone who's serious about this is meeting in the same spot.
Mm-hmm. What are you excited about CEA over the next year?
In the next year, I'm getting really excited about lettuce. So we have some new initiatives, some projects at Grodan that I'm a part of. Looking at our existing products, considering if we need to make changes there, but also trying to get into new systems where historically Grodan hasn't had a solution for you. So I'm looking forward to connecting more with these people. There's a lot of system builders out here too, which is critical that I'm talking with them. There's been a lot of growth in the lettuce space, and it's grabbed our attention. So I'm excited about lettuce.
Awesome. Well, Austin, it's so good to connect with you, reconnect with you here. I'm glad you're here. And thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Of course.
Hey, Allison, it's so good to see you at Indoor AgCon. So please introduce yourself for our audience.
My name is Allison Justice, and I am owner of the Cannabis Research Center and Coalition.
This is your first Indoor AgCon, isn't it?
It is. It's my first, and I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. We go way back-ish, right? Yeah.
10 years?
To about 10 years. We both were at this interesting cannabis conference in the basement of a hotel in San Francisco. And we bonded over the ridiculousness of cannabis bro science. Can I say that on record?
Yeah, sure.
Can you just give us a little bit of background for those people who don't know who you are?
Okay, well, I'm from South Carolina. Got my PhD in plant science. Knew I wanted to do horticulture research of some sort, and I love the cannabis plant and decided it was time to go west and join the cannabis industry. So I stayed in California about 3.5 years working in commercial production, and then moved back to my home state, South Carolina, where now I do independent research on cannabis.
So something I think that's really important for our listeners to know is that you were, if not the first, one of the first adopters of LED lights to grow cannabis. And so I just want to thank you. You literally influenced this whole industry by taking a chance and doing the science to prove that it worked. Can you just say like a couple of things, like why you took that leap?
Yeah. So sadly in cannabis, there's a lot of ego tied around practices. And on one hand, I can understand that, right? You've been underground doing things, and you're very proud and confident of how you've been doing things. But I come from academia like you, where we're taught to question everything and to find the best way, and the best way might not be how you've been doing it. So changing your thought process based on science. And so I was at Outco, a commercial production facility, and we had HPS lights. And we were told we could not expand horizontally, which was terrible because we had space to expand horizontally, and that was the plan. But our ceilings were really high, and so we could expand vertically. Well, the only way we could expand vertically is by implementing LEDs. But at the same time, at that day and age, everybody was saying, well, you can't even grow under LEDs. Maybe you can veg. And I just thought that was the silliest thing I'd ever heard because, to an extent, a photon's a photon. And if we change our practices to meet this little bit of a difference, that's produced by growing with LEDs, then we can implement them. So I said, let's do a trial. If this is beneficial, I could make it make sense to the owners on a monetary standpoint. The growers were mad at me for changing everything, but whatever, that's what you got to do to make changes. And it was very successful. And to this day, they've, over doubled their canopy size because of research.
It was also one of the when you presented your research with Fluence at MJ BizCon, that is probably the one and only seminar at MJ BizCon, that was interesting and informative that I've ever been to.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. So on that note, what brought you to Indoor AgCon for the first time? I'm so curious.
I've been wanting to come for many years. It's based in my roots, right? Agriculture in general. And, to be honest, it is disappointing at a lot of the marijuana, cannabis-focused conferences. There's a lot of packaging and, my heart and soul is with the growing and post-harvest. And so I wanted to come here because I know this is where a lot of the new tech is for just CEA in general. And so getting here before it can be, accepted from the cannabis industry, I thought would be very beneficial. And so now that I'm here, I'm seeing that. Of course, there's, brands I haven't heard of, techs that are very valuable and, the cannabis industry should be implementing. And it's been great. To be honest, this is the show that growers need to come to because this isn't cannabis focused. It's not lights and, confetti. We're just, this is agriculture and, it's done the right way without all the marketing BS.
So, on that note, what is one of your biggest takeaways from this conference?
To be honest, it's that I need to share this conference with, the growers in the coalition and everybody out there is, hey, if you want something that's agriculture focused, this has the newest tech, newest companies out there, this might be your better choice than potentially some of the cannabis shows out there.
Yeah. What are you excited about for the CEA industry over the next year?
As a researcher, it's exciting because I get to see a lot of those new techs, right? Whether it's air filtration or whether it's fertilizer automation or whatever it may be. If it's a company new to the space, they need somebody to do validations and give some proof besides what they say themselves. And so coming here, it's a step into the CEA space where, after this experience, I feel like I need to be more involved in this space. And so, getting to share that with the members and leading them to somewhere they can see all these new techs, that's what's most exciting for me.
Have you ran into anyone here that you didn't expect to see or that you haven't seen in a long time?
Oh, yeah, lots of people. So, before cannabis, I was in floriculture. So I was always at the OFAs and cultivates and things like that. So there's been a lot of booth stops where I've seen people that, I knew from 12 years ago. So that's been really exciting to reconnect and, see their businesses getting more into cannabis and, agriculture coming together as one versus being this black sheep of cannabis and then there be,
or the
CEA.
magic of cannabis.
Exactly.
Can you just talk very briefly about the CRC and what you guys are doing?
Yes. So, excitingly enough, just 2 days ago, we have released to be open source. So, up until then, we've been a membership model. And so cultivators, vendors alike would donate money and, guide us on what experimentation they want us to run. And we would do that. But, different than CEA, there's not as much yet, and knock on wood, there's not as much importance found in research with cannabis cultivators sometimes. Mm-hmm. Or if there is, their bosses are telling them, hey, well, you have a science background, I hired you, why aren't you doing all this? Just like, well, what are they supposed to do? Do it at home or in the R&D space they don't have? Yeah, right. And so there's some disconnects there. And so I feel like opening this up, having it be viewed by the greater public, and whether it's home growers or large cultivators, and sharing some of this, technological knowledge, doing studies, getting that information out there, is really what we want to do. And so we do contract research. So for, say there's a lighting company that says we give 20% greater yields, and they need a third-party validator to test that. That's unbiased. I'm brand agnostic, so, we work with lots of lighting manufacturers and, just trying to clear out a lot of the BS with science.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate the research and the work that you're doing and continuing because, as we know, there's not a lot of academic research in cannabis because there's a lot of fear about losing federal funding. Well, they're losing their federal funding now anyway, so who cares? What do you got to lose at this point? Well, I'm really excited that you're here and that we got to connect here in Vegas, and I hope to see you again. And thank you for being part of our 100th podcast episode.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Hey, Grant. It's great to see you at Indoor AgCon.
Good to see you guys as well. What a presence here. Dr. Greenhouse. It's just a privilege to be in the light and the reflection of this wonderful signage that you have. Nadia, I just feel like we're all glowing right now. So, what a time.
Why thank you.
Yeah.
We like to shine a light on the industry.
Yep. It's important. Shining light on operations improvements. In the days where capital might not be flowing as heavily as it has been in the past, this is the opportunity that customers have to get the edge. Working with folks like yourself, folk like ARC teams, there's always an opportunity.
So, Grant, tell our audience who you are.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. So my name is Grant Piegler. I work for Siemens. I'm in one of the parts of our organization, but to keep it simple, power distribution portfolio, building controls, and really that built environment is the kind of area that we support. And then we have other folks in our teams that handle more in that process automation and things of that nature.
I'm kind of curious. I was really excited to see Siemens getting interested and involved in controlled environment agriculture. Can you just speak a little to what Siemens sees in the potential for CEA?
Would love to. So we're fortunate in our team that the leaders of our organization have buy-in. And not just buy-in on, we think that's a good idea, there's buy-in financially of investments that they've made. As a note, Siemens is a larger organization. There's a lot of matrix levels of overlap, and we've been grateful that in many of the positions of influence in our organization, people have said, we think CEA is of interest. We think that is a space that we should be investing our time and resources to expand, and having the capacity to be in the space even if there's periods where there might not be as heavy of an investment, which I'm grateful for, because sometimes I think large organizations can say, all right, if it's not immediately having a benefit to our bottom line this quarter, it's not worth investing. And so there's been folks in our team that have been focused on this space for some time. So I'm newer to the space, the year and a half, but I'm very grateful for the learnings I've gotten to have internally and externally, and that there's buy-in corporately across the board, so which has been cool.
Nice. Have you been to Indoor AgCon before?
This is my first time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
This is really cool. So there's a few other industries I support. I was sharing earlier with a colleague. I think there's been some shows where I think everything's relative to our expectations, because talking to colleagues that have been coming here for a long time, this is one heck of a performance. There's a lot of folks here, even looking back at some of your episodes, talking about where it's been in the past and previous debriefs. This is a phenomenal place. So to me, I really like the down-to-earth nature. We're rooted in the earth here. We're growing. I think that's really cool. It's been fun getting to be around some of the conversations, noticing that those convos are coming out of a time where things maybe were different, but people are talking a little bit more about their secret sauce or what they're doing to be competitive, sharing some of that insight and resources, and a semi-optimistic at the same time, a knowledge of where we kind of are right now in capital. So it seems a little interesting to be your first introduction. However, it does feel like there's a nice resurgence that's awaiting or currently going on.
Yeah, I think this is where we are right now in the industry, is kind of getting back to basics, right? And everyone feels a little more grounded than where we've been in the last 5, 6, or 7 years, where our heads were kind of in the clouds. Yes. We saw big visions. There were a lot of claims and proclamations that didn't come true. Yes. And so it's like just coming back to our roots and saying, okay, what is possible? What do we need? What is practical and financially feasible?
Yes. Do you think that for innovation, this is going to be kind of something you're going to look back on some years and say, like, okay, we went from kind of being in our high castle to like back out, like, how do we work together well? Do you think this is going to be a piece? Have you seen this previously in the industry from your perspective prior to that influx of capital? Or do you think this is kind of a different stage that we're in right now?
Well, I don't think that you're supposed to ask questions of the podcast interviewer.
Yeah. Let me just find my way to the door really quick.
I think that was
How dare you turn the tables? No, it is a really good question. I mean, look, I've been in controlled environment agriculture for 27 years. I was one of the first cohort of students that came out of the University of Arizona's Controlled Environment Ag Center program. And those of us who were part of that first cohort, several of us are still very successful because we believed in it before it became a dream, right? Before it was the in thing. And now all of a sudden, we're the popular kids on the block because, you know, we were in it, right? And we believed in it from the very beginning. And so I'm excited that people are recognizing that greenhouses are a tried and true technology. Yes, there are tweaks to be made based on your crop, based on your region, just based on new developments, right? New technology and automation and everything. But just going back to where we started, right? It feels good, and for me, you know, for Dr. Greenhouse, the greenhouse all of a sudden has a spotlight on it again. And for those people who said, oh, you should change the name of your company to something more generic to capture all of CEA, I was like, no, greenhouses are the future. Yeah. Right? And so it's great to see that coming to fruition. And so I hope that stays. Though I will say that as new people come in, as new money comes back in, as people see that this is viable, there is a risk, I think, to make some of the same mistakes that we've made over the last decade. And we've already seen, you know, the smartest person in the room suck the life out of practical knowledge, and people investing in automation and big technology that they don't necessarily need or know how to use, and should maybe be stepping back and saying, okay, wait a second, like, what are we doing here, right? Like, I just don't want it to swing back to tech, to the tech focus. I want it to stay grounded in the farming and then using technology as the tool to support food production.
100%. Right size. I think, too, about, we were talking earlier of digital twins, all these things. There are so many products, platforms, pieces but I do not need a semi-truck to move a small lawnmower. You know, it's like there are so many things about like, hey, we need to understand what the needs are, what we're trying to accomplish, and kind of level set expectations rather than, oh my gosh, we have this tool, I always use this tool. Anyway, things like that.
Yeah. And, you know, I've talked to a few people who said that they've developed a technology while they were a grower as an operator. And I'm like, that is awesome. Like, that's exactly the technology that the industry needs because it comes out of need.
True innovation.
Exactly.
Yeah, the greatest driver of that change is pain. Like when we have it ourselves and we find a solution, and that's cool. That's fun.
So what has been you've already mentioned some of your takeaways, but like if you just had one nugget, one primary takeaway or lesson from this conference, what has it been?
One lesson from the conference, I think there's a thread, it's recent in my mind as you just talked about it, but that resiliency, like finding ways to win as a company when the cards might not be the best in your hand. And I think that adds to the grit. Again, we hope to remember that, to cherish that in future days if capital does return, in the sense of, hey, let's be mindful of how we use this and steward this well. That to me translates in every industry where we're tight on CapEx. We want to make the best decisions we can, and future OpEx, kind of have this mindfulness that there are so many different businesses that are not certain of the forecasting today, and they're mindful of the political environment and the changes coming, that it's like, hey, we want to be as nimble and effective so that we can all be here a few years from now and have a ability to have a corporate expense. So to me, that takeaway is fun to kind of be getting into the nitty gritty, the weeds more of what can we do to be successful, like kind of where are those pain points for a customer, and meeting them where they are instead of a place where it's kind of we're off pie in the sky in some thread. So that to me is really fun. Some of the conversations we've had with people, just learning more about what makes them tick, what helps them. Because there's one side when you just look at the process base, but then you get to step back and be in a seminar talking about how you're positioning yourself to a supplier. I never think about that. I don't really think very much like from the packaging point onward, what our impact. I really think about the things that I touch. So it's fun to hear those threads from a leader that you might be talking to in the future and think, putting yourself more in their shoes. So I feel like that's cool to see the whole landscape, or at least more of the landscape than I've seen in the past, and that's pretty neat to me.
I love that. You're getting a fuller view of the lay of the land. Yeah.
What are the pain points? Hearing, about the capital change that I just saw posted, Vertical Harvest, talking about one of the shifts that just happened in regulation on LinkedIn. It's interesting. I would not think about that. That isn't something I was always subscribed to follow those tech topics, and yet now we get to do that and kind of understand, all right, capital is going to be different for some of these firms anyway.
Right. What are you excited about for CEA over the next year?
Oh, man. I'm excited we were having a conversation earlier around the idea of digital twins. Again, it's kind of like a Porsche with a stick. If I'm not able to drive that, I like a Camry. It's probably not going to be helpful for me. But if you do have an ability to save some time, make better decisions, sharing best practices to a degree, I'm excited to see it continue to grow and expansion, because I'm fortunate we got a kid coming on the way. I'm really excited about that. I want my kids to eat really good things that are nutrient dense, that don't have heavy metals. And it's like, man, the more that we get, more expansion in the markets, cost effective, all these things to make it more widely available for healthier people. That's exciting. And to know that you get to work around that space that has this personal pull-through influence as well. So I'm grateful Costco carries some microgreens that I'm a huge fan of. I eat it a lot. They last a really long time out of my fridge. A lot of people in my family have started to like it. So that's been really fun to get to see that stuff, like actually meeting you as a person outside of your business. So
awesome. Grant, thank you so much for participating in our 100th episode. It was so nice to finally meet you in person and have some of the conversations we've had. So I hope to see you again next year.
Likewise, thank you for the opportunity. Congrats on 100 episodes.
Thanks.
It's a big deal. Awesome.
Hey, Neil. It's so great to see you at Indoor AgCon.
Dr. Greenhouse, oh my gosh, how often do we get to see each other in person?
Not often enough
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
So can you please just introduce yourself real quickly?
Absolutely. I'm Neil Mattson. I'm a professor in plant science at Cornell University, and I direct our Controlled Environment Agriculture Group. And one of our big research initiatives is reducing energy use in CEA as the second largest input. So we co-lead the GLAZE initiative, Greenhouse Lighting and Systems Engineering. So
Awesome. And you guys hosted the Vivid Canopy event yesterday, right?
Yeah. So we need a more diverse workforce in CEA. And I really loved the conversations around taking like formerly incarcerated individuals.
That was amazing. Yeah.
And like, what was the stat? 1/4 of Americans have a criminal record.
That's insane.
Yeah. So like, okay, let's be open about this.
Yeah.
Let's not. Yeah.
That was so eye-opening. I couldn't believe it. So what have you thought about this year's show?
It is amazing how much it's grown over the years. So this is becoming a more mature show, and I think it's the show for CEA in the U.S. So I think the first one I went to was in 2016.
Okay.
There were maybe like 15 or 20 booths, and one track, not 5 tracks at a time.
Everyone was in the same room.
Yeah, right. Everyone was in the same room. There was also a lot more hype then. I remember like telling people about like, oh, is it a good conference to go to? And I'm like, well, the networking is great, but the content you just have to take with a grain of salt.
It was kind of like a raw kind of conference back in the day.
Yeah,
everyone cheering each other on.
Yeah. And maybe we needed that too, but
for sure.
But now it's like more nuts and bolts, and like I think people are starting to realize they need to work together we don't need everyone reinventing the wheel. We need people to work together to optimize systems and the kind of whole nexus that we need to promote fresh fruits and vegetables that are grown in CEA.
Yeah. I mean, just the conference has grown. There's, I think, 300 booths is what I heard, right? And I think somebody said that the registration doubled in capacity from last year, which is incredible. And, just the breadth of crop types that we're seeing and a lot of growers, and it's just very cultivator focus, it seems like, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's a nice niche for us because there's other conferences that are more on the retail end, like IFPA and so on.
Right.
And floriculture, which I love at Cultivate.
Of course, it's the most beautiful conference you'd ever attend.
But for CEA, this is the place to be.
Yeah.
It's starting to get to the point where you can't like talk to everyone that you want to talk to in a 2-day period of time. So I'm not sure how we think through that for the future, but I'm not necessarily advocating for a longer conference, but I don't know.
Because in some ways it's kind of nice how it's short and sweet, it's condensed, it's compact, right? And you don't have to like completely obliterate your entire week for a conference. But if it keeps growing, 2 days is not going to be enough.
That's right. Or somehow focus that.
Right. So. Which, honestly, if it means more time with people like you, I wouldn't mind.
Oh, likewise. I was also hearing from new people to the conference, and we were brainstorming. We wish there would be something like speed dating, or just like how do new people kind of meet other people, whether they be well-established or new people. So I'm not sure what that would look like, but like
that's an interesting idea.
Spend a minute, introduce it in a structured way, introducing yourself to people, and then rotate through and
rather than just in line for coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
Or just who you happen to sit next to at a table.
Those are great, but the introvert in me likes structured ways to meet people.
Right. I like that. So, what has been one of your biggest takeaways of this year's conference?
Oh my gosh, I was trying to. I knew you would ask that, so I was trying to think about things. One, and I may be biased, is like everybody's realizing that lettuce is going to be following the trajectory of tomatoes, or we think it will, right?
What's that mean?
So what that means is over the last 30 or 40 years, greenhouse tomatoes went from being a relatively minor crop to now the majority of fresh tomatoes that Americans eat come from greenhouses. And so lettuce, I think the numbers I'm hearing are now about 5%, which is actually a big change from maybe 5 years ago was less than 1%. So we think we're on that exponential phase of the growth curve. And then is it going to be a matter of 15 years or 20 years? But I think, we're going to need that whole infrastructure and supply chain in place to make this change happen.
That's so exciting. Do you think that the majority of CEA lettuce is going to be grown in greenhouses?
Personally, yes. That's a fine question. We've had some of those conversations before. If our country had more of a infrastructure for non-carbon based energy, like nuclear centers around the U.S. or something, where we had cheap energy that's not carbon based, then I think vertical farms can really explode. But I think we're probably not there for the next 15 years or so.
Okay, well, that just naturally makes me have to ask a follow-up question. I mean, with AI and the data center infrastructure we need, they're talking about building more nuclear plants or modular nuclear plants.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity, do you think, to co-locate and co-operate indoor or greenhouse farms with data centers and these nuclear plants?
I think that the devil's always in the details, but I'm cautiously optimistic about it. And what I mean by that is I've seen in the olden days some greenhouses located next to power plants. And those kind of worked. But power plants needed to shut down, and do maintenance and things like that. So like, okay, we might be shut down for a week, or we're already at peak capacity. Like the grid doesn't need more energy right now. We'll shut down. So it's like, so you always had to have a backup, like heating source, for example. And maybe that's not the case for these data server farms, but we have to like understand, from a mass balance standpoint, what's the total amount of heat they can produce, and is the delta T, is the difference in temperature high enough to move that air efficiently to heat spaces that need to be heated? Yeah.
Or if you need to cool that greenhouse, are we now going to like absorption chillers or something like that with that waste heat?
Good point. And that could improve then maybe the vertical farm nexus.
Sure.
Yeah, because then we really need chilling and dehumidification, as you know well. So
right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what are you looking forward to or excited about for CEA over just the next 12 months, the next year?
Oh, yes. Great question. So, which is trying to buy me time to think of an answer to that. One of the things I'm excited about is the industry seemingly is working more closely together, and there's associations like Blaze, but also the CEA Alliance. And people are talking about like, okay, what does the consumer want in a leafy green? Let's just not make things up and then throw it at the consumer and see if they like it. Like, let's as an industry work together and show people what the value proposition is. And I think we can get there with other supply sides of the industry too. So how do we? It's not just like myself as a researcher. I've studied lighting a lot, but many people come to the realization, including myself, it's like it's part of an integrated system. And so if you're optimizing lighting, that means you're also optimizing nutrition and irrigation and temperature and so on. So I think I'm excited about that like systems approach over the next year.
I love that. More holistic approach rather than just being single-mindedly this technology or that technology. This is a holistic system.
And to some degree, we're seeing that a little bit with mergers and acquisitions on the supply side of the industry, because then it's like, oh, we're not just a substrate company, we're also a mechanical or materials handling company as well, and we can work together to be a full system provider to you, not just like, oh yeah, we'll do this. You work with someone else who does that, and we might not talk with them very well.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, Neil, it's so great to have you on our 100th podcast episode. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Happy 100th anniversary.
Thank you.
Of the podcast. Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe Dr. Greenhouse will continue into perpetuity without me.
Yeah, we'll be here in 2100.
There you go. Indoor AgCon 100 and something.
Remember what happened in 2025.
How quaint. How cute.
That was fun. And
well, I hope to see you again next year, and hopefully we can see each other in person before the next Indoor
Absolutely.
AgCon.
You take care.
Thanks, Neil.
Bye now.
This year's guests were Brian Sullivan, president of Indoor AgCon, Kelley Nicholson from MicrogGow and Autogrow, Jim Rearden, president of Biotherm, Michelle Keller from Microgreens, Carly Becker from the Ohio Controlled Environment Agriculture Center, Glenn Behrman with Growtainers and Hydro Farm, Henry Gordon Smith, founder of Agritecture, Austin Smith from Grodan, Allison Justice, founder of the Cannabis Research Center and Coalition, Grant Piegler from Siemens, and Neil Matson from Cornell University. Thank you so much for spending the last 100 episodes growing with us.